My grandfather stared at my parents across the Christmas roast and asked why strangers were living in the lake house he had gifted me. I had no clue I had owned a property for 3 years while drowning in debt. Later that night, he handed me a stack of bank statements and a simple choice: continue being the silent, obedient daughter, or finally take back the life my family had stolen from me. My name is Summer Armstrong, and if there was a specific award for feeling like an imposter in your own lineage, I would have swept the category 3 years running. The dining room of my parents' house in Riverbend was a masterclass in aggressive festivity. A 12-foot balsam fir, dragged from some boutique nursery that charged by the inch, loomed in the corner, drowning under the weight of heirloom ornaments that cost more than my car. The air was thick, almost suffocating, perfumed with the rich, savory scent of slow-roasted turkey, caramelized onions, and the cloying sweetness of mulled wine. It was the smell of money. It was the smell of a life I was supposed to have, but had somehow missed the exit for. I sat at the very edge of the mahogany table, a piece of furniture so polished it felt like a sin to touch it. I kept my elbows tucked in, trying to occupy the smallest amount of geographical space possible. I was wearing a navy blue velvet dress that I had salvaged from a thrift store bin 2 years ago. I had spent 3 nights hemming the frayed edges and steaming out the smell of someone else's perfume. But sitting here, under the unforgiving glare of the crystal chandelier, I felt like I was wrapped in a dish rag. Across from me, my sister Sabrina shimmered, literally. She was wearing a sequined slip dress that probably retailed for $2,000, the kind of fabric that looked like liquid gold poured over her skin. She was currently ignoring the $30 a pound roast beef on her plate, her attention entirely consumed by the glowing screen of her phone. Her thumb scrolled with a rhythmic, practiced apathy. 17,000 likes in 40 minutes. Sabrina murmured, not looking up. She took a sip of wine, leaving a perfect crescent of red lipstick on the crystal rim, and the brand rep just DM'd me. They want to send me the entire spring collection. My mother, Denise, beamed. Her face was a mask of perfectly applied foundation and maternal pride that seemed reserved exclusively for one daughter. That is wonderful. Darling, you see? Leonard, I told you that modeling course in Milan was an investment, not an expense. She is building an empire. An empire, my father, Leonard Hart, echoed. He swirled his Cabernet, leaning back in his chair with the expansive satisfaction of a man who believes he owns the room. Speaking of empires, I closed on the commercial lot down by the old textile mill yesterday. The zoning board gave me hell. But you know me. I do not take no for an answer. We are looking at a 30% return by next quarter, 30%. It is going to be the jewel of the portfolio. I cut into my turkey, the meat dry in my throat. 30%. I did the math in my head. A reflex I could not turn off. 30% of his deal was probably more than I would make in 5 years. I was currently working 2 jobs, one as an administrative assistant for a dental supply company that smelled perpetually of antiseptic, and another shelving books at the public library on weekends. My bank account balance was currently sitting at $42.18. I had a heating bill due on Tuesday that was $112. I took a bite of food, trying to swallow the bitterness along with the stuffing. This was the ritual. The Hart family Christmas performance. Leo the tycoon, Denise the supportive matriarch, Sabrina the golden child, and Summer the cautionary tale. The one who did not try hard enough, the one who lacked the spark. Summer, my father said, his voice booming slightly, the volume of a man used to being listened to. What is it you are doing again, the filing? It is administrative management, Dad, I said, keeping my voice steady. Right, management. He chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. Well, honest work, I suppose. Not everyone is built for the high stakes. Right. You always were the quiet one, content with the small things, unlike your sister. Mom chimed in, reaching over to pat Sabrina's hand. Sabrina has always had that drive, that hunger. You could learn a thing or two from her. Summer. Maybe ask her to help you with your wardrobe. That dress well. It is a bit dated, isn't it? I gripped my fork tighter. The metal bit into my palm. I like this dress. Mom, of course you do. She sighed. A tragic sound. You always did settle, at the head of the table. My grandfather, Arthur Grayson, sat in silence. He had not spoken a word since the appetizers were served. He was a small man now, shrunken by age, his tweed jacket hanging a little loose on his shoulders, but his eyes were the same as they had always been, sharp, gray, and terrifyingly alert. He was not eating, he was watching. He watched my father boast. He watched my mother preen. He watched Sabrina scroll. And he watched me. For the last 3 years, I thought he had forgotten me. My parents told me he was in Europe, living out his twilight years in Tuscan villas, too busy and too senile to answer the letters I sent. Letters that, I later learned, never made it past the Riverbend post office. I had spent 3 Christmases crying myself to sleep, thinking the one person who ever understood me had finally realized I was not worth the effort. But he was here now, and the air around him felt colder than the winter wind rattling the window panes. The market is shifting, my father continued, oblivious to the tension radiating from the head of the table. But real estate is tangible. You can touch it. That is why I tell everyone, put your money in dirt. God is not making any more of it. He laughed at his own recycled joke. Isn't that right? Arthur, you always said land was the only thing that mattered. The laughter died out slowly, replaced by the soft clinking of silverware and the low hum of Silent Night playing from the hidden speakers. Grandpa Arthur slowly picked up his linen napkin. He dabbed the corner of his mouth, folded the napkin into a perfect square, and placed it next to his untouched plate. The movement was so deliberate, so precise, that it drew the eye of everyone at the table. Then, he picked up his fork. He held it for a second, looking at the tines glinting in the candlelight, before letting it drop. Clatter. The sound was sharp, violent in the hushed room. It cut through the music like a gunshot. My father paused, his wineglass halfway to his mouth. Arthur, you okay? Pop. Grandpa turned his head slowly. He did not look at my father with the vague, watery affection of an elderly relative. He looked at him with the cold calculation of a predator assessing a wounded animal. Say that again. Leo, Grandpa said. His voice was not loud. It was low, even, and devoid of any warmth. It was a voice that scraped against the spine. My father blinked. Say the joke about the land. No, Grandpa said. Explain to me the part about ownership. The room went dead silent. Even Sabrina stopped scrolling, her thumb hovering over the screen. I don't follow, Dad stammered, his smile faltering, twitching at the corners. Grandpa leaned forward. The candlelight cast deep shadows across his face, turning his wrinkles into canyons. It is a simple question. Leo, explain to me why strangers are living in the lake house I gave Summer. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy. It was a physical weight that pressed down on the table, crushing the air out of the room. I saw the color drain from my father's face. It did not happen gradually. It happened all at once, as if someone had pulled a plug. His skin turned a sickly, waxen gray. His hand, the one holding the Baccarat crystal wineglass, began to tremble. A small ripple of red wine sloshed over the rim and stained the pristine white tablecloth. My mother froze. Her fork hovered halfway to her mouth, a piece of roasted potato impaled on the end. Her eyes darted to my father, then to Grandpa, wide and terrified. Sabrina looked up, her brow furrowed in annoyance. What she asked, her voice sharp. What lake house, Grandpa? You are ruining the vibe. Are you confused again? But Grandpa did not look confused. He looked lethal. Summer. Grandpa said, not breaking eye contact with my father. Did you hear what I asked your father? This was it. This was the moment. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. My blood roared in my ears. I had to play my part. I had to be the confused, downtrodden daughter one last time. I dropped my knife. It hit the china with a dull thud. I widened my eyes, letting my jaw go slack. I looked at Grandpa, then at my parents, feigning a confusion that I had actually felt 3 days ago, but now wore like a costume. What I whispered, my voice trembling just enough. "What lake house, Grandpa? What are you talking about? You gave me a house." My mind was racing, but not with confusion. It was racing with the memory of the documents currently sitting in the trunk of Grandpa's rental car outside. The deed, the trust fund, the forged power of attorney, the 3 years of rental income statements totaling over $150,000. My father made a choking sound. He set the wine glass down, but he missed the coaster. The glass hit the table hard, wobbling dangerously. "It is a misunderstanding." "Summer," he croaked. His voice was an octave higher than usual. "Your grandfather. He is mixing things up. Old age. The memory goes. My memory is fine. Leonard," Grandpa said. The steel in his voice could have cut glass. "I remember signing the deed 3 years ago. I remember the trust. And I remember driving by Lake Willowmere 3 days ago and seeing a man named Peter grilling steaks on the porch. A porch that belongs to my granddaughter. My mother kicked my father under the table." It was a subtle, desperate motion, but the tablecloth shifted, and I felt the vibration through the floorboards. "Dad, please," Mom hissed, her voice tight and strained. "Not now. Not at Christmas. We can discuss these administrative errors later." "Administrative errors," Grandpa repeated. He finally turned his gaze away from my father. He looked at me. For a second, the rest of the room melted away. The ostentatious tree, the lying parents, the shallow sister, they all dissolved into the background blur. It was just me and the old man who had saved my life 3 days ago in an airport arrivals lane. His eyes locked onto mine. There was no confusion in them. There was a fierce, burning intelligence. It was the look of a general nodding to his lieutenant. "Do it," his eyes said. "Drop the curtain." I looked at my father, who was sweating now, beads of perspiration forming on his upper lip despite the chill in the room. I looked at my mother, whose smile had cracked into a rictus of panic. I remembered the heating bill on my counter. I remembered the ramen noodles I had eaten for dinner 4 nights a week for 3 years. I remembered the way they looked at me when I walked in tonight like I was a stain on their perfect picture. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the expensive roast that was bought with money from my house. I was not Summer the disappointment anymore. I was the owner of the Willowmere estate, and it was time to collect the rent. The silence that followed my grandfather's question was heavy, but silence was a language I had been fluent in since I was 5 years old. Sitting there, watching my father struggle to pull air into his lungs, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if my spirit was floating up toward the crystal chandelier, looking down at the girl in the thrift store velvet dress. It was a familiar feeling. It was the same way I had felt for the majority of my life in the Hart household present, but not really counted. People often think that favoritism in families looks like Cinderella. They imagine one child scrubbing floors in rags while the other gets hand-fed grapes. But in Riverbend, abuse was never that loud. It was quiet. It was polite. It was a slow, systematic erosion of importance until you simply accepted that you were the background noise to someone else's symphony. My childhood memories are not filled with screaming matches. They are filled with rationalizations. "You are the older sister. Summer," my mother would say, usually while taking something out of my hands to give to Sabrina. "You have to be the bigger person. You have to yield. Sabrina is sensitive. She needs this more than you do." Sabrina needed everything. When she was 6, she needed ballet lessons, which meant I had to stop my tumbling class because the schedule conflicted and Mom could not drive to 2 places at once. When she was 10, she needed a grand piano because the music teacher said she had unrefined potential, while I was handed a mop and told that learning to keep a tidy house was a skill that would serve me forever. I was not beaten. I was not starved. I was simply edited out. I remember a Tuesday when I was 16. I had brought home a report card with straight A's, the result of staying up until 2 in the morning studying biology while Sabrina practiced scales. I put it on the kitchen counter, right next to a brochure for a summer leadership camp I desperately wanted to attend. When my father came home, he placed his keys right on top of my report card without even looking at it. He was beaming, holding a glossy flyer for a teen modeling showcase in Atlanta. "Look at this, Denise," he had said, his voice vibrating with the kind of excitement he never wasted on me. "The scout said Sabrina has the look. This could be it. This could be the start of the brand." They spent the entire dinner discussing flight schedules and hotel bookings for Atlanta. My report card remained under the keys until the next morning, when I quietly slid it into the trash. The leadership camp cost $400. The trip to Atlanta cost $2,000. Nobody ever said we couldn't afford the camp. They just said, "Resources are tight right now. Summer, we have to prioritize Sabrina's future. She is going to be the one who puts this family on the map." I was the support staff. I was the one who remembered that Mom was allergic to penicillin. I was the one who categorized the tax receipts because Dad didn't have the headspace for minutia. I was the one who picked Sabrina up from parties at 3 in the morning when she was too drunk to drive, terrified she would ruin her reputation, only to have her vomit in my back seat and complain the next day that my car smelled like cheap air freshener. But the real break, the moment that defined the geography of my adult life, happened the summer I turned 18. Most parents in Riverbend throw their kids a graduation party. My parents threw me a life lesson. I came home from my shift at the local diner, smelling like grease and burnt coffee, to find 3 cardboard boxes in the hallway. My father was sitting in the living room, reading the Wall Street Journal. He didn't even fold the paper down. "Summer," he said, turning a page, "your mother and I have been talking. You are 18 now, an adult." "Okay," I said, looking at the boxes. My stomach dropped. "We think it is time for you to learn the value of independence," he continued, using his boardroom voice. "Living under this roof, having everything provided, it makes a person soft. We want you to be tough. We want you to understand the real world." "So you are kicking me out?" I asked. "We are launching you," he corrected. "We found a room for rent over on 4th Street. Mrs. Gable needs a lodger. It is affordable if you pick up a few extra shifts. We paid the first month. After that, sink or swim. It is the greatest gift we can give you. The greatest gift." 2 months later, when Sabrina turned 18, they bought her a condominium near the university so she would have a safe, inspiring space to create. They called it an investment in her mental health. When I asked about the difference, Mom just sighed and looked at me with pity. "Oh, Summer," she said, "Sabrina is an artist. She is fragile. The real world would crush her. You are a survivor. You are built for the grind. You don't need the help." So I ground. I worked double shifts. I took night classes at the community college because I couldn't afford a full university tuition. I ate instant noodles and learned to sew my own clothes. And every time I came to family dinners, exhausted and wearing shoes with worn-out soles, they would look at me with a mix of disappointment and judgment. "You look tired." "Summer," Dad would say, sipping a scotch that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "You know, if you just applied yourself a bit more, showed some ambition, you wouldn't be living hand to mouth. Look at Sabrina. She is networking. She is making moves." It was a perfect, closed loop. They crippled me financially, then mocked me for limping. In that house, in those years of slow erasure, there was only one person who ever looked at me and saw someone worth knowing. Grandpa Arthur. He was the anomaly in the heart equation. While my father was obsessed with the loud, flashy accumulation of wealth, Grandpa was obsessed with the quiet history of things. He spent his days in the library study, surrounded by books that smelled like vanilla and dust, and albums of stamps from countries that no longer existed. When I was a teenager, while Sabrina was out chasing popularity, I would sit on the Persian rug in his study. We wouldn't talk much. We didn't have to. He would hand me a magnifying glass and stamp a tiny serrated square of paper from 1923. "Look at the ink." "Summer," he would say, his voice raspy and gentle. "Someone designed this. Someone printed it. Someone licked the back of it and sent a letter across an ocean during a war. Every stamp is a life no one knows about. Just because it is small doesn't mean it doesn't carry the weight of the world. He taught me that being quiet didn't mean being empty. He taught me that observing was a form of power. You see things they don't. He told me once, nodding toward the living room where my parents were loudly debating the merits of a new luxury car. They look at the shine. You look at the structure. Never lose that, little one. The world has enough peacocks. It needs more owls. He was my anchor. He was the only proof I had that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't just a defective version of Sabrina. And then, 3 years ago, he vanished. I remembered the phone call vividly. It was a Tuesday. Mom called me while I was on my lunch break at the dental office. "Grandpa moved," she said, her tone breezy, as if she were telling me she had bought a new scarf. Moved where I asked, nearly dropping my sandwich. "He is 82. He barely drives. Europe," she said. "He decided he wanted to see the old country again. Italy, France, maybe Switzerland. He sold his townhouse and just left. He said he wanted a clean break. No long goodbyes. But without saying goodbye to me, I felt a crack open up in my chest. He is busy. Summer. He is chasing his youth. Don't take it personally. He said he would write when he settled down." I waited. I waited for weeks, then months. I wrote letters long, pouring my heart out letters, and mailed them to the forwarding address Mom gave me. I told him about my promotion to office manager. I told him about how lonely I felt. I told him I missed the stamps. Nothing came back. Eventually, the letters started returning to me. Stamped "Return to Sender, Recipient Unknown." When I asked my parents, they shrugged. "He's probably traveling," Dad said, dismissive. "You know how eccentric he gets. He probably forgot to update his mail. Or maybe look. Summer. He is old. He has a new life. Maybe he just doesn't want to be tethered to the past. You need to let it go. Stop being so needy." So I did. I let the rejection settle into my bones like a damp chill. I convinced myself that the one person who loved me had finally seen what my parents saw, that I was forgettable, that I wasn't worth the cost of a postage stamp. It broke something inside me that I didn't think could be fixed. It confirmed my deepest fear that I was unlovable, even to him. But now. I sat at this table with the juice of the roast beef congealing on my plate, and the reality of the last 3 days was crashing into the reality of the last 3 years. If Grandpa Arthur had gifted me a house 3 years ago, if he had set up a trust fund for me 3 years ago, then he hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't run away to Europe to escape his needy granddaughter. He hadn't been too busy to write. He had been here. He had been trying to reach me. I looked at my mother. She was taking a sip of wine, her hand trembling slightly, her eyes fixed on a spot on the tablecloth to avoid looking at Grandpa. I looked at my father, who was dabbing sweat from his forehead with a monogrammed napkin. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow to the stomach. They knew he hadn't abandoned me. They knew he had given me a way out, a house, money, a future. A way to escape the cycle of poverty and servitude they had trapped me in. And they had stepped in between us. They had intercepted the gift. They had intercepted the love, for 3 years, while I counted pennies to buy peanut butter, while I shivered in my apartment because I couldn't afford to turn up the thermostat, while I cried over the silence of a grandfather I thought didn't care they were cashing checks. They were driving cars bought with my rent money. They were funding Sabrina's vanity projects with my trust fund. They were eating this $300 Christmas dinner on a table that, legally, I had paid for. The anger that flared up inside me wasn't the hot, explosive kind. It was cold. It was absolute zero. It was the kind of anger that clarifies everything. But right next to the anger, there was terror. Because I knew what happened when you challenged the hearts. I knew how they spun narratives. If I spoke up, if I laid the evidence on the table, I wouldn't just be asking for my money back. I would be detonating a nuclear bomb in the center of my family. I would be sending my parents to prison. I would be the girl who destroyed Christmas, the girl who put her own father in handcuffs. Could I do that? Was I strong enough to be the villain in their story, to be the hero in mine? I looked at Grandpa Arthur. He was watching me again, His face was unreadable to everyone else, but I saw the slight nod. He was waiting for me to catch up. He was waiting for me to realize that the cage door had been unlocked the whole time my parents were just standing in front of it, telling me it was welded shut. I gripped the linen napkin in my lap. The fabric felt expensive, smooth, and utterly fake. I wasn't the unloved child. I wasn't the forgotten grandchild. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, letting the truth settle in my lungs, replacing the suffocating air of the room. I wasn't abandoned by him. I was hidden by my parents. 3 days before the Christmas dinner that would end my family as I knew it, I was standing in the freezing rain outside the back entrance of the dental supply warehouse, trying to coax my beat-up sedan into starting. It was 11 at night on a Tuesday. My breath plumed in the air, a ragged cloud of exhaustion. My fingers were numb inside my thin wool gloves as I turned the key in the ignition. The engine groaned, sputtered, and died. I slammed my forehead against the steering wheel, fighting the urge to scream. I had $14 in my checking account until Friday. A tow truck would cost at least $100. That was when my phone buzzed against the passenger seat. I looked over. The screen lit up the dark cab with a harsh blue glow. It was an international number, no name, just a long string of digits, starting with a country code I did not recognize. I hesitated. Usually, I ignored these calls, scammers trying to sell me extended car warranties, or telling me my social security number had been compromised. But something about the timing, about the sheer hopelessness of the moment, made me pick it up. "Hello," I answered, my voice rough with cold and frustration. There was a crackle of static, the sound of a connection stretching across an ocean. Then, a voice I had not heard in 3 years broke through the noise. Summer, the sound of my name, spoken with that specific, gravelly cadence, stopped my heart. It was a voice from a ghost story. "Grandpa," I whispered, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Grandpa Arthur." "Oh, thank God," he said. His voice was trembling, thick with an emotion I could not place. I was not sure if this number was even real. "Your Aunt Clara, the one in Idaho. She dug it up for me." "Grandpa, where are you?" I asked, tears instantly pricking my eyes. "Are you okay?" "Mom said you were in Europe. She said you didn't want to talk to anyone." "She said what?" The tremble in his voice vanished, replaced by a sharp edge of confusion. "Summer, I have written to you every month for 3 years. Every single month. I sent them to your apartment on 4th Street. Every one of them came back to me. Recipient unknown. Return to sender. I thought you had moved on. I thought you were angry that I left." The world tilted on its axis. The cold inside the car suddenly felt much worse. "I never got a letter," I said, my voice shaking. "Grandpa, I wrote to you too. Mom gave me an address in Paris, then one in Rome. They all bounced back. They told me you were too busy traveling. They said you wanted a clean break." The line went silent for a long time. The only sound was the hum of the distance between us. "A clean break," he repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "I see. Summer, listen to me carefully. I am not in Europe. I am at the airport in New York. I just landed. I have a connecting flight to Riverbend that lands in 4 hours. Can you pick me up?" "Yes," I said immediately, ignoring the fact that my car was dead. "Yes, I will be there." "Good," he said. "We have a lot to talk about, starting with why your parents told me you were too busy with your big career to visit your dying grandfather. I spent $60 on an Uber to get to the airport at 3 in the morning. It was reckless spending, but I did not care. I stood at the arrivals gate, watching the few weary travelers trickle out of the secure area. When I saw him, my heart broke a little. He looked older than I remembered. His shoulders were a little more stooped, his hair a little thinner and white as snow. He was wearing a trench coat that had seen better decades and pulling a battered leather suitcase that rolled with a distinct wobble. But when he saw me, the years seemed to fall away. He dropped the handle of his suitcase and opened his arms. I ran to him, burying my face in the scratchy wool of his coat, smelling the familiar scent of pipe tobacco and peppermint. "I missed you," I sobbed, the relief washing over me in waves. "I missed you too, little owl," he whispered, squeezing me tight. "I missed you too." He pulled back and looked at me, his eyes scanning my face, then my worn coat, then my scuffed boots. His expression hardened. It was a look of dawning comprehension, and it was terrifying. "You look tired, Summer," he said softly. "I am working a lot," I said, wiping my eyes. "Just trying to make ends meet." He nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "Let's get the car. I want to go home." "Okay," I said. "I have to call a cab. My car died. I can take you to Mom and Dad's house. I'm sure they will be surprised to—" "No," he cut me off. "Not their house. My house. Or rather, your house." I blinked. "My house, Grandpa. I live in a studio apartment above a laundromat. You can't stay there. There is no guest bed." He looked at me with genuine confusion. "Summer, stop joking. I am tired. Take me to the lake house. Take me to Willowmere." I stared at him. The fluorescent lights of the baggage claim hummed overhead. "Grandpa, what are you talking about? I don't have a lake house." He stared back, searching my face for any sign of deception. When he found none, his face went very still. "The house at Lake Willowmere, the one I bought 5 years ago, the one I transferred to your name when you turned 25, that was 3 years ago. Summer." "Grandpa," I said gently, a pit of dread forming in my stomach. I thought, this is it, the dementia, the senility Mom talked about. "You never gave me a house. I have never even been to Lake Willowmere. That is the rich part of town." He did not argue. He did not get angry. He just went very, very quiet. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek black smartphone surprisingly modern for him. He tapped on it for a moment, pulled up an email, and shoved the screen in my face. It was a digital receipt from a property management firm. "Transfer of deed complete. Owner, Summer Armstrong. Dated 3 years ago. Drive," he said, his voice cold as ice. "Rent a car. Use my card. We are going to the lake." The drive to Lake Willowmere took 40 minutes. It was a part of Riverbend I only saw in magazines or when I was driving past it to get to the cheaper suburbs. The road wound through thick forests of pine and oak, past gated driveways and stone walls that cost more than my entire education. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gray. The air was crisp and biting. "Turn left here," Grandpa instructed, pointing a shaking finger at a narrow paved lane marked private road. "Grandpa, we are going to get arrested for trespassing," I said, my hands sweating on the wheel of the rental car. "It is not trespassing if you own the land," he snapped. We rounded a bend, and the trees opened up. There it was. It was breathtaking. A sprawling, 2-story craftsman house made of cedar and stone, sitting right on the edge of the water. A wide wooden deck stretched out over the lake, which was currently misting in the morning chill. Large windows reflected the sunrise. It looked like a sanctuary. It looked like a dream, and it was occupied. Smoke was rising from a chimney. There were 2 luxury SUVs parked in the driveway, a white Range Rover and a silver BMW. A string of festive lights was draped along the porch railing. "See?" I said, letting out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Someone lives here. Grandpa, you must have sold it and forgotten." "I did not sell it," he said through gritted teeth. "Park the car." We got out. The gravel crunched loudly under our feet. As we approached the porch, the front door opened. A man in his 50s stepped out. He was wearing a cashmere sweater and holding a mug of coffee. He looked like the kind of man who played golf on Tuesdays. He looked at us with polite curiosity, not hostility. "Good morning," he called out. "Can I help you folks? You look a little lost." Grandpa straightened his spine. Despite his travel clothes and his age, he looked imposing. "Good morning. I apologize for the intrusion. My name is Arthur. This is my granddaughter, Summer. We were just admiring the architecture. It has been a long time since I was in this neighborhood." The man smiled, relaxing. It is a beauty, isn't it? We have been here for 2 years now. Best decision we ever made. 2 years? Grandpa repeated. You own it? Then… Oh, no, the man laughed. I wish. Market in Willowmere is crazy. We are renting. Long-term lease. We are hoping to renew for another 3 years if the landlord agrees. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. The landlord? I asked. Yeah, the man said. Great guy. A bit firm on the price, but he takes care of the place. Leonard Hart. You know him. He is a big developer in town. The name hung in the cold air like a suspended guillotine. Leonard Hart, my father. I felt the blood drain from my face. I reached out and grabbed Grandpa's arm to steady myself. My father was renting out a house Grandpa thought was mine. Leonard, Grandpa said, his voice remarkably steady. Yes, I know of him. He is reputable. Absolutely. The man Peter. He introduced himself, said, Look, it is freezing out here. Why don't you two come in for a second warm-up? I just made a fresh pot of coffee. My wife, Sarah, loves company. I wanted to say no. I wanted to run back to the car and drive until the gas ran out. But Grandpa was already stepping forward. That would be very kind of you, Peter. Thank you. We walked into the house. If the outside was beautiful, the inside was devastating. High-beamed ceilings, a stone fireplace roaring with a fire, plush leather furniture, art on the walls. It smelled of cinnamon and expensive wood polish. It was warm. It was safe. It was everything my drafty, moldy apartment was not. We stood in the open-concept kitchen while Peter poured coffee into ceramic mugs. So, Grandpa said, looking around casually, you pay rent directly to Mr. Hart. Well, technically it goes through his LLC, Peter said, handing me a mug. For tax purposes, I assume it is all very professional. My eyes wandered to the large stainless steel refrigerator. Held up by a magnet was a printed sheet of paper, a weekly schedule or a reminder list. But next to it was a small, laminated card with banking instructions. I stepped closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. Monthly rent transfer instructions. Payee Willowmere Retreat. LLC Bank Riverbend. First National Account. Ending 4922. I knew that account number, or at least, I knew the last 4 digits. I had seen them on my father's desk once when I was helping him sort his business expenses. He had told me it was his investment holding account, but that wasn't what stopped my breath. Below the banking details, there was a contact line for emergencies. Property manager Leonard Hart, owner of Record Summer Armstrong via power of attorney. I stared at the words, owner of Record Summer Armstrong, my name, on the fridge of a stranger's house, in a house worth millions. Summer. Grandpa's voice was soft, right beside my ear. I pointed at the card. My finger was shaking so badly I couldn't keep it still. Grandpa looked at it. He didn't say a word. He just closed his eyes for a brief second, a look of profound pain crossing his face. Then he opened them, and the pain was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Peter, Grandpa said, turning back to our host with a pleasant smile that didn't reach his eyes. Thank you for the coffee. You have a lovely home. We really must be going. So soon? Peter asked. Yes, Grandpa said. My granddaughter just remembered she has some administrative work to catch up on. We walked back to the car in silence. The gravel crunched under our feet, louder this time. The sun was fully up now, casting a harsh, revealing light on the world. I got into the driver's seat, but I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the lake. I own this, I whispered. Grandpa, I own this house. Yes, he said. He was looking out the window at the house, at the smoke rising from the chimney, at the life that was happening inside without me. And Dad is renting it out. For $4,500 a month, Grandpa said. That is the market rate for a property like this, maybe $5,000 in the summer. I did the math in my head. $5,000 a month, $60,000 a year, multiplied by 3 years. $180,000. I thought about the time I had to choose between buying antibiotics for a sinus infection or paying my electricity bill. I chose the electricity and was sick for 3 weeks. I thought about the time my mother told me they couldn't help me with a security deposit for a safer apartment because money was tight. I thought about the dress I was wearing right now. Under my coat, a polyester blend I bought at a discount outlet. Why, I asked, my voice cracking. Why would they do this? They have money. Dad has his deals. Mom has her family inheritance. Why steal from me? Grandpa turned to me. His eyes were wet, but his voice was iron. Because they could, he said. Because you are the one who doesn't fight back. Because to them, you are not a person. Summer, you are a resource. He reached out and covered my hand on the steering wheel. His skin was paper-thin and cold. It seems, he said, and his voice dropped to a whisper that sent a shiver down my spine, that you have been the landlord of a life you were never allowed to live. You have been the owner of a house that you have never been allowed to put furniture in. He squeezed my hand. Drive us to a hotel. Summer, not the cheap one. The best one in town. I am paying. We have 3 days to build a case, and then we are going to dinner. I started the car. As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The house at Willowmere Lake shrank in the distance, but the image of it and the name on that refrigerator burned into my retinas. I wasn't just sad anymore. I was dangerous. The morning after we visited the lake house, the sky over Riverbend was a flat, unyielding gray, the kind that promised snow before nightfall. We didn't talk much on the drive to the First National Bank on Main Street. The silence in the car wasn't empty, though. It was filled with the rustle of the file folders Grandpa Arthur had brought with him, each page sounding like a dry leaf scraping against pavement. We parked in front of the bank, a modest brick building with a faded awning that I had walked past 1,000 times without ever going inside. My own banking was done online, usually at 2 in the morning, frantically transferring $20 from savings to checking to avoid overdraft fees. "Ready?" Grandpa asked, his hand on the door handle. He looked tired, the skin under his eyes purple and thin, but his jaw was set in a line of granite. "No," I said honestly. "But let's go." Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and carpet cleaner. Grandpa didn't wait in the queue. He walked straight to the desk of the branch manager, a woman named Mrs. Gable, who looked like she had been working there since the invention of the decimal point. "Arthur Grayson," he said, placing his passport on the polished wood. "I need to access the records for the Armstrong Trust, specifically, the custodial account opened 3 years ago." Mrs. Gable blinked behind her thick glasses, then her face softened into recognition. "Mr. Grayson? My goodness, we haven't seen you in ages. I thought you were well. Your daughter said you were settling permanently in Provence." "My daughter says a lot of things," Grandpa said. His voice clipped. "This is Summer Armstrong, the beneficiary." Mrs. Gable typed something into her computer, the keys clicking like hail on a tin roof. After a moment, she frowned. "I will need to verify Ms. Armstrong's identity, of course, and Mr. Grayson, according to our notes, Mr. Leonard Hart has been handling the correspondence for this account via power of attorney." "We are here to correct that," Grandpa said. 10 minutes later, we were sitting in a small glass-walled conference room. Mrs. Gable placed a stack of documents in front of us. It looked like a mundane pile of paper statements, legal disclosures, carbon copies. But as I reached for the top sheet, I felt a physical weight to it. The first document was a deed transfer. Property 44, Willowmere Drive. Transferor Arthur Grayson. Transferee Summer Armstrong. Date October 14th, 3 years ago. "Happy 25th birthday," Grandpa whispered, pointing to the date. "I wanted you to have something that was yours, something no one could take away." I stared at the paper. October 14th. I remembered that birthday. I had spent it working a double shift at the diner. My parents had sent me a text message and a $50 gift card to a grocery store. "Keep reading," Grandpa said. I turned the page. The next document was a general power of attorney for property management. It granted Leonard Hart full authority to lease, mortgage, and manage the property at 44 Willowmere Drive on behalf of the owner, Summer Armstrong. At the bottom of the page was a signature line, Summer Armstrong. I felt the blood drain from my face. The signature was loopy, confident, with a flourish on the S that I never used. My real signature was small, cramped, a habit from years of trying to take up as little space as possible. This signature was bold. It looked suspiciously like the way my mother signed her checks, just with different letters. "I didn't sign this," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I looked up at Mrs. Gable. "I have never seen this document in my life." Mrs. Gable looked uncomfortable. "Well, it was notarized. See the stamp here? The notary is, let me check, a Mr. Stevens. He does a lot of work for Mr. Hart's development firm." "Of course he does," Grandpa muttered. "Now, the transaction history, please." Mrs. Gable printed out a spreadsheet. It was column after column of numbers, a waterfall of data. November 1st, deposit $4,500. Source, Willowmere Retreat, LLC. November 2nd, withdrawal $4,400. Destination, Hart Holdings, operating account. It went on like that. Month after month. $4,500 in, $4,400 out, like clockwork, like a heartbeat. "Wait," I said, pointing to a recurring line item I didn't understand. "What is this every month, on the 15th? Supplemental income transfer. $800. Grandpa sighed, a sound that seemed to rattle in his chest. "That wasn't from the rent. Summer, that was from me. When I set up the trust, I arranged for a monthly stipend, $800, not a fortune, but enough so you wouldn't have to work 2 jobs. Enough so you could maybe take a class, or buy decent food, or just breathe." I stared at the number. $800. $800 was exactly the amount I was short when my car broke down last winter, and I had to walk to work in the snow for 2 weeks. $800 was what I needed to fix my tooth when a filling fell out. But instead, I just chewed on the other side of my mouth for 6 months. "They took that too?" I asked. My voice wasn't shaking anymore. It was dead flat. "Every cent," Grandpa said. "Look at the destination account. Hart Holdings operating account. It wasn't just greed, it was theft. And it wasn't just theft of money, it was theft of ease. They had stolen my comfort. They had stolen my sleep. They had stolen the hours I spent scrubbing floors and filing papers when I could have been resting." "We need more," Grandpa said, standing up. "This proves the money moved. Now we need to prove why you never knew about it." Our next stop was the main post office on 4th Street. It was an old building with high ceilings and echoes. We asked to speak to the postmaster, but the woman at the counter, a lady with gray hair pulled into a tight bun, smiled when she saw the name on my ID. "Armstrong," she asked. "Oh, you must be Denise Hart's daughter, the one who travels." I froze. "Excuse me?" "Mrs. Hart comes in all the time," the woman said cheerfully. "She has a standing order to pick up mail for Summer Armstrong. She said you are a freelance photographer, always hopping around the country, so it is safer for her to collect your important documents. Such a sweet lady. Always asks about my grandkids." My stomach turned over. "Does she pick up everything?" "Oh, mostly the official-looking stuff," the woman said. "Bank statements, legal notices, anything that looks like junk mail. She says to just discard, but she is very diligent. She signed the authorization form right here." She pulled a binder from under the counter and flipped through it. There it was again, the authorization form, the fake signature. And a note in my mother's distinct, slanted handwriting: "Please hold all mail for pickup by mother. Denise Hart. Daughter is out of country indefinitely." "Can I have a copy of that?" I asked. "Well, usually we don't—" "I am the daughter," I said, leaning in. "And as you can see, I am not out of the country. I live 3 blocks away." The woman looked at my face. Then at Grandpa's stony expression, she quietly made a photocopy. We walked out of the post office into the biting wind. I held the photocopy against my chest like a shield. "One last stop," Grandpa said. We drove to a glass office building downtown. The sign on the door read Corbett Associates, Attorneys at Law. Miles Corbett was a man who looked like he was carved out of oak. He was Grandpa's age, maybe a little younger, with a shock of white hair and a suit that cost more than my annual salary. He greeted Grandpa with a firm handshake and me with a polite nod. We sat in his office, surrounded by walls of leather-bound books. Grandpa laid everything out on the desk: the deed, the trust documents, the fake power of attorney, the bank statements showing the money siphoning out, the post office authorization. Miles put on a pair of reading glasses and went through the pile. He didn't speak for a long time. The only sound was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner and the turning of pages. Finally, he took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Arthur," he said, his voice heavy, "you know what this is." "I know what it looks like to me," Grandpa said. "I want to know what it looks like to the law." Miles looked at me. His eyes were kind but serious. "Summer, what your parents have done, this isn't a gray area. This is a felony. Several felonies. Actually, wire fraud, forgery, identity theft, embezzlement, grand larceny." He picked up the bank statement. "The amount they have taken over 3 years exceeds $150,000. In this state, that is a Class B felony. We are talking about significant prison time, 5 to 10 years, minimum." Prison. The word hung in the air. I tried to picture my mother in a prison jumpsuit. I tried to picture my father, who panicked if his scotch wasn't the right temperature, in a cell. It seemed impossible. It seemed like a movie. "But they are my parents," I said stupidly. Surely they can just pay it back if we confront them." Miles leaned forward. "Summer, look at these dates. Look at the consistency. This wasn't a one-time mistake because they were desperate. This was a system. They built a machine to extract money from you. They set up an LLC. They forged signatures multiple times. They manipulated the postal service. This requires planning. It requires malice." He paused, letting that sink in. "I can draft a settlement," Miles continued. "We can present it to them privately, ask for the money back, transfer the deed, keep it quiet. They might agree to avoid jail." "Or," Grandpa asked. "Or," Miles said, "we file a police report. We initiate criminal proceedings. The district attorney takes over. The assets are frozen. The house is returned to you immediately, and they face a judge." He looked me dead in the eye. "The choice is yours. Summer, but you need to understand one thing if you go the quiet route. If you let them settle, you are teaching them that the price of stealing your life is just money. You are telling them that they can buy their way out of hurting you." I looked at the pile of papers. I saw the date of the deed transfer my 25th birthday. I saw the monthly $800 withdrawals. I thought about the night I sat in the dark in my apartment because I had run out of light bulbs and couldn't justify the $5 to buy a new pack until payday. I sat there in the dark, crying, thinking I was a failure, thinking I was lazy, thinking I deserved the poverty because I wasn't smart enough or driven enough like Sabrina. But I wasn't a failure. I was a victim. They hadn't just taken my money. They had taken my self-worth. They had let me believe I was broken so they could stay rich. "They didn't just steal the house," I said quietly. "They stole 3 years of me believing I could be someone." Grandpa placed his hand over mine on the desk. "So, what do you want to do?" I looked at the stack of evidence. It was heavier than any words they could ever say to defend themselves. "I don't want a settlement," I said. "I want the truth, and I want everyone to see it." Miles nodded, pulling a fresh legal pad toward him. "Then we have work to do, because once we pull this thread, the whole sweater unravels." "Let it unravel," I said. "I am tired of being cold." My studio apartment was not designed for war councils. It was designed for a single person with very few possessions and an even smaller tolerance for claustrophobia. The radiator in the corner clanked with a rhythmic, metallic cough that sounded like a dying lung, and the smell of the laundromat downstairs detergent and damp lint seeped through the floorboards. Yet, here we were. My grandfather sat on my lumpy futon, his posture rigid, looking like a king in exile. Miles Corbett sat on my only folding chair, his impeccable Italian suit creating a jarring contrast with the peeling beige paint on my walls. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, staring at the coffee table. The surface of the table was buried under a blizzard of paper, bank statements, deeds, email chains, notarized forgeries. It looked like a conspiracy theorist's basement, but unfortunately, the conspiracy was just my life. "We have enough to bury them, Arthur," Miles said, tapping a pen against a stack of withdrawal slips. "If we walked into the district attorney's office right now, Leonard and Denise would be indicted by Tuesday. The paper trail is not just smoking, it is on fire." "But," Grandpa asked, sensing the hesitation in his old friend's voice. "But," Miles turned to look at me, his eyes sharp behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "White-collar crime is messy. If we go straight to the police without a confrontation, your father will spin a narrative. He will say it was a misunderstanding. He will say he was managing the assets to protect Summer from her own inexperience. He will say the forged signatures were authorized verbally. He will hire expensive lawyers to muddy the waters, and he might just get a jury to believe that he was a benevolent, overworked father making administrative errors." I felt a flash of heat in my chest. Administrative errors. "He spent $150,000. "I know," Miles said calmly. "But to make this stick, to make sure there is no wiggle room, no plea deal that lets them walk away with a slap on the wrist, we need a confession, or at least a reaction that proves intent. We need to corner them when they feel safe." Grandpa Arthur leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "The dinner," he said. "Exactly," Miles nodded. "Denise invited you to Christmas dinner tomorrow night. She wants to show off. She wants to play the perfect family. That is their weakness, their arrogance." I looked at the papers again. I picked up a credit card statement showing a charge for $5,000 at a luxury spa in Switzerland, paid for by the Willowmere Retreat LLC account. "You want to ambush them," I said. "I want to give them a shovel," Miles corrected, "and see if they dig a hole or try to build a bridge. My guess, they will dig." Grandpa looked at me, his expression softening. "Summer, I need you to understand what we are asking. Miles is talking about legal strategy, but I am talking about your parents. Once we do this, once we walk through that door with these papers, there is no going back. You will be the one sending them to prison." The room went silent, save for the radiator's metallic wheeze. Prison. The word felt heavy, like a stone in my throat. I thought about my mother, who panicked if her silk blouses were not dry cleaned properly. I thought about my father, who needed a specific type of orthopedic pillow to sleep. I imagined them in a holding cell, stripped of their comforts, stripped of their pretenses. A wave of nausea rolled over me. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to be the daughter who locked her parents away? It felt like a violation of nature. It felt like the ultimate sin. "Maybe," I started, my voice trembling. "Maybe we just threaten them, make them sign the house over and pay me back. Why do we have to destroy them?" Grandpa stood up and walked over to the window. He looked out at the brick wall of the adjacent building. "Summer," he said, not turning around. "Do you remember why I bought that house?" "Because you wanted me to have an asset," I recited. "No," he turned, and his eyes were blazing. "I bought it because I saw how they looked at you. I saw them treating you like a servant in your own home. I wanted you to have a place where you were the master, where you didn't have to say thank you for scraps." He walked back to the table and picked up a bank statement. "I trusted Leo," Grandpa said, his voice cracking with a deep, bitter regret. "I thought he was pompous. Yes, I thought he was shallow, but I never thought he was a thief. I never thought he would look at his own child and see a profit margin. When I see this," he shook the paper, "I don't see money. I see him eating your future. I see him cannibalizing his own daughter to feed his ego. That is not family. Summer, that is a parasite. I looked down at the floor. My mind drifted back, sorting through the catalog of no I had heard over the last 3 years. I remembered when I wanted to get my master's degree in library science. It was a 2-year program. It would have cost $20,000. I had sat my parents down, presented a budget, and asked for a loan. We are just stretched so thin right now. Honey, Mom had said, touching her pearl necklace, the market is volatile. We barely have enough liquidity to keep the house running. You understand, don't you? Maybe in a few years. I had understood. I had nodded and gone back to my minimum wage job. 2 months later, Sabrina had gone to Paris for a fashion inspiration workshop. She stayed in a 5-star hotel. She bought 3 designer handbags. She posted photos of herself drinking champagne on a boat on the Seine. I looked at the bank statement in front of me. September 12th. Withdrawal. $8,000. Description, travel expenses. Paris. My breath hitched. They didn't pay for Sabrina's trip. I paid for Sabrina's trip. I looked at another entry. June, $5,000. Dental veneers. Sabrina had gotten a new smile that summer. I had been walking around with a cracked molar because I couldn't afford the crown. I paid for her smile while I was hiding mine. The realization hit me like a physical slap. Every time they told me we can't afford it, they were lying. The money was there. It was my money. They were using my house, my inheritance, my safety net, to fund the golden child's lifestyle while watching me drown. They watched me work double shifts. They watched me lose weight because I was skipping meals. They watched me wear clothes with holes in them. And then they drove to the bank and withdrew my rent money to buy Sabrina a new car. The guilt I felt about prison evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They hadn't just stolen money, they had stolen my potential. They had looked at my life and decided it was worth less than Sabrina's accessories. I am not the one destroying the family, I said, my voice steady now. They did that when they decided I was a bank account instead of a daughter. I looked up at Miles. What is the plan? Miles smiled, a predatory expression that made me glad he was on my side. We turned the Christmas dinner into a deposition, but without the lawyers present, just family. I will contact the Riverbend Police Department in the morning, Miles continued, pulling out a notepad. I know the captain. I will explain that we have a significant fraud case involving a substantial flight risk given your father's international accounts. I will have a squad car parked down the street from the house tomorrow night. They will wait for my call. A squad car, I repeated. On Christmas. It is poetic justice, Grandpa said grimly. They love a show. Let's give them a finale. Miles outlined the script. We would arrive late. We would let them get comfortable, let them drink their wine, let them brag, and then Grandpa would ask the question. But, Grandpa said, raising a finger, there is one condition. What is it? I asked. I will ask the first question, Grandpa said. I will break the ice, but you, Summer, you have to finish it. You have to be the one to tell them it is over. You have to be the one to say the words. Why? I asked. You are the patriarch. They fear you. Because if I do it, you are still the child hiding behind her grandfather, he said gently. This is not about getting the money back. This is about taking your power back. You need to look them in the eye and let them see that the daughter they dismissed is the one who is ending their reign. I nodded. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. I will do it. We spent the next 2 hours rehearsing. Miles played the role of my father, throwing out excuses and denials. It was just a loan. We were going to pay it back. You are ungrateful. I practiced my answers. I practiced keeping my voice low. I practiced not crying. Crying was what the old Summer would do. The new Summer, the owner of Willowmere, did not cry. She audited. By the time Miles packed up his briefcase, the sun was beginning to set, casting long, bruised shadows across the floor. Get some sleep, Miles said at the door. You look like a ghost. I feel like one, I admitted, but a haunting kind, not a fading kind. When they left, the apartment felt quieter than usual. I walked over to the small bookshelf where I kept my few treasures. Tucked into the frame of a mirror was an old photograph. It was taken 15 years ago, in front of the massive Christmas tree at the Hart House. In the photo, I was 12. I was standing on the far edge of the frame, half obscured by a branch. Sabrina was in the center, sitting on Santa's lap. My father dressed up in a velvet suit. My mother was leaning in, beaming at Sabrina. I looked like I had just wandered into the frame by accident. I looked at that little girl. I wanted to reach through the glossy paper and pull her out. I wanted to tell her to run. "Tomorrow," I whispered to the 12-year-old me. "Tomorrow, we stop hiding in the corner." I picked up the photo and turned it over. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, it said, "The Hart Family. Christmas 2010. Perfect. I put the photo down. Tomorrow. That perfection was going to shatter, and I was going to be the hammer. I turned off the lights. But I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to the radiator clank, rehearsing the lines in my head. Why are strangers living in my house? Where is the money? Dad, I am not your daughter anymore. I am your creditor. The script was ready. The stage was set. All that was left was for the curtain to rise. The timeline in my head snapped back to the present, syncing up with the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. We were back in the dining room. The investigation was over. The trial was about to begin, and the jury consisted of my Aunt Clara, my Uncle Mark, and 3 cousins who were currently picking at their appetizers. My parents were putting on a performance worthy of a Tony Award. If I did not know that my father was facing a potential 10-year sentence for wire fraud, I would have believed he was the master of the universe he pretended to be. He stood at the head of the room, holding a glass of vintage champagne, his other hand resting possessively on the back of my mother's chair. "To family," Leo announced, his voice booming with a manufactured warmth. "And to another year of prosperity. We have had some challenges. Sure, the market is a bear, but the Hart resilience, it is undefeated. Cheers," the relatives chorused. I raised my glass but did not drink. I watched my mother. Denise was glowing, or at least, she was shimmering thanks to a layer of highlighter that caught the chandelier's light. She was busy curating the moment for her Instagram story. She made everyone pause before digging into the shrimp cocktail so she could get the perfect angle. "Look at this spread," she narrated into her phone, her voice dropping into that fake, breathy register she used for social media. "So blessed to have everyone together. Hart family Christmas, tradition." She panned the camera to Sabrina, who struck a practiced pose, chin down, eyes up, looking effortlessly bored and expensive. Then, the camera panned past me. Mom moved the phone quickly, blurring me out, as if my thrifted dress might ruin the aesthetic of her feed. "Speaking of prosperity," Aunt Clara said, leaning forward. She was a well-meaning woman who unfortunately measured success by the size of one's diamond earrings. "Denise, you mentioned Sabrina has some big news." Mom lit up like a neon sign. This was her favorite topic. "Oh, we are just so proud. Sabrina is in final talks with the Elite Visage Agency in New York. They think she has a very editorial look. We are looking at a contract that could start next month." "Modeling in New York," Uncle Mark whistled. "That is not cheap. Rent in the city is murder." "Well, you have to invest to harvest," Dad interjected smoothly, swirling his drink. "We are fully prepared to support her transition. We have set aside a significant seed fund. It is what you do for your children. You give them wings." I felt a muscle in my jaw jump. A seed fund. I wondered if that fund came from my October rent check or my November one. "And what about you?" "Summer?" Aunt Clara asked, turning to me with that pitying smile I knew so well. "Still at the dental place." "Administrative management," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Summer is our steady rock," Mom cut in quickly, dismissing me with a wave of her manicured hand. "She is very grounded. She prefers the simple life. Don't you, honey?" She has never had the same ambition for the high life that Sabrina does. She is happy with her little apartment and her routine. It is actually quite sweet. Very minimalist. Minimalist. That was the code word for, We stole her money so she has to live like a pauper. I think ambition is subjective, Mom, I said. It was a small push, a tiny testing of the waters. My father's eyes flicked to me, sharp and warning. Contentment is a virtue. Summer, don't let the world tell you otherwise. Not everyone is cut out to be a mogul. He turned back to Uncle Mark, eager to change the subject to something that stroked his ego. Actually, Mark, I wanted to tell you about a project I'm co-founding. We call it the Willowmere Retreat. It is a high-end rental property out by the lake, luxury cabin style. We are seeing incredible occupancy rates. I watched Grandpa Arthur. He was sitting perfectly still, his hands folded on the table. He looked like a statue, but I saw his finger tapping a silent rhythm on the tablecloth. Tap, tap, tap. Willowmere, Uncle Mark asked. I thought that area was all private ownership. Didn't know you were buying commercial land out there. Oh, it is a private residence we converted, Dad said, taking a large gulp of wine. I am the managing partner, handled the acquisition, the renovation, the tenant management. It is a passive income stream, the best kind. I looked down at my plate to hide the smirk that was threatening to break through. Acquisition. That was a fancy word for theft. Earlier that evening, before the guests arrived, I had walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. Dad's laptop was open on the granite island. The screen was bright, displaying his email inbox. I hadn't meant to snoop, but the subject line in bold red text was impossible to miss. Urgent, final notice. Mortgage payment. Past due. 12 Hart Lane. And right below it, overdraft alert Hart. Holdings operating account. They were broke, or nearly there. They were living paycheck to paycheck, but the paychecks were mine. The prosperity Dad was toasting to was a house of cards held together by my stolen rent money. If I cut the flow, they wouldn't just lose face. They would lose everything. That sounds impressive, Leo, Grandpa Arthur said. His voice was soft, barely rising above the clink of silverware, but it had a texture that cut through the noise. Dad stiffened slightly. It is, Arthur. It really is. I have a knack for spotting value. And the maintenance? Grandpa asked, looking genuinely curious. A property like that near the water, the damp must be terrible for the wood. Who handles the repairs? I have a team, Dad said vaguely. Contractors. And the tenant? Grandpa continued. Is it a family? A corporate rental. Dad was starting to sweat. I saw a tiny bead of perspiration trickle down his temple. He dabbed it away with his napkin. A family. Good people. They pay on time. Why all the questions? Pop, thinking of getting into the landlord business. Sabrina let out a loud, dramatic sigh. She dropped her phone onto the table with a clatter. Oh my God. Can we please talk about something else, Grandpa? You are obsessing. Who cares about some old house? She rolled her eyes, looking at her cousins for validation. I thought that lake house was abandoned anyway, Dad. Didn't you say it was like a teardown? That is why we never go there. The room went quiet. It was a small slip, a tiny crack in the narrative. Dad had told the investors Uncle Mark that it was a luxury renovation. He had told Sabrina it was a teardown to keep her away from it. Uncle Mark frowned. Tear down. But Leo just said it has incredible occupancy rates. Dad's laugh was brittle, sounding like dry leaves crunching. Sabrina is confused. She is thinking of the old shed on the back lot. The main house is pristine, pristine. I am not confused, Sabrina snapped. She hated being corrected. You told me last summer that the Willowmere place was a dump, and that is why we couldn't use it for my birthday party. You said it had mold. My mother kicked my father under the table. I saw her shoulder jerk. Sabrina, darling, eat your shrimp, Mom hissed through a tight smile. You are mixing up Dad's properties. He has so many. I am just saying, Sabrina muttered, picking up her fork. The story keeps changing. Aunt Clara looked from Dad to Mom, her eyebrows knitting together. The air in the room grew heavier, the easy holiday joy curdling into suspicion. It wasn't that they suspected a crime. they just sensed a lie. And in Riverbend society, social lies were the appetizers for gossip. I looked at Grandpa. He met my gaze. Now, his eyes said. He picked up his fork, held it for a moment, and then let it drop. Clatter. The sound silenced the table. Grandpa turned his entire body toward my father. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. The confused old man act evaporated, replaced by the shark I had met in the lawyer's office yesterday. "Leo," Grandpa said. "Yes. Arthur?" Dad's voice was tight, high-pitched. "Sabrina brings up an interesting point about stories changing," Grandpa said slowly. "So let's get the story straight once and for all." He leaned forward. "Tell me again, why are strangers living in the house I gave Summer?" There it was. The question. The bomb. Dad froze. His hand, holding the wine glass, began to tremble. The liquid inside rippled, creating tiny red tides. He looked at the guests, then at me, then at Grandpa. He was looking for an exit, a joke, a way to spin this. "I told you." "Arthur," Dad stammered. "It is a temporary arrangement. We are caretaking, keeping the pipes warm. You know how houses deteriorate when they sit empty. Strangers paying $4,500 a month are not caretakers," Grandpa said. "They are tenants. And if they are tenants, that implies there is a lease. And if there is a lease, there is income." The room was deadly silent now. Uncle Mark had stopped chewing. Aunt Clara was holding her breath. The income. Dad swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. The income is being held, in trust, for Summer. We are building a nest egg for her. She is not good with finances. Arthur, you know that. She works at a dental office. She gets overwhelmed. "I see," Grandpa said. "So you are doing this for her benefit." "Absolutely," Mom chimed in, her voice shrill. "We are protecting her. Summer is well. She is naive. If we gave her control of an asset like that, she would probably sell it for pennies or let it fall into ruin. We are managing it, being responsible parents." "And Summer knows about this?" Grandpa asked. "She knows you are managing her house." "Of course she knows," Dad said, his confidence returning slightly now that he had found a lie he could stick to. He looked around the table, offering a reassuring smile to the relatives. "We discussed it years ago. We sat down. We looked at the numbers, and Summer agreed it was too much responsibility for her. She signed off on it. We have the paperwork." "She signed off on it," Grandpa repeated. "You have her signature?" "Yes," Dad said firmly. "On a power of attorney. It is all legal, all above board." Grandpa turned his head slowly. He looked at me. "Summer," he said gently, "is this true?" I felt every pair of eyes in the room land on me. My mother's eyes were pleading, begging me to play along, to be the good girl who covered for them one last time. My father's eyes were threatening, a silent promise of retribution if I embarrassed him. Sabrina looked annoyed that the attention was off her. I took a sip of water. My hand was perfectly steady. I lowered the glass and looked at my father with wide, innocent eyes. I channeled every ounce of the confusion I had felt 3 days ago outside the airport. "Dad," I said, my voice quiet, trembling just enough to sound fragile. "What is it?" "Honey," Dad said, leaning in, expecting me to confirm his story. "Just tell Grandpa you remember the agreement." "Dad," I said, letting my brow furrow. "What house are you talking about?" My father blinked. "The lake house. Willowmere?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't understand. You guys always told me that house burned down." A gasp went around the table. Aunt Clara put a hand to her mouth. "What?" Dad whispered. "No, I never—" "You did," I continued, my voice gaining a little more strength, but still laced with confusion. "When I was 22, I asked about Grandpa's old place. You and Mom sat me down in the kitchen. You said there was an electrical fire. You said Grandpa had to sell the land to pay for his medical bills in Europe. That is why I stopped asking him for money, because you said he was broke." I looked at Grandpa. tears welling up in my eyes, real tears, fueled by the memory of that lie. Grandpa, I thought you were destitute. That is why I never told you I was struggling. I didn't want to burden you. Summer, stop it, Mom hissed, her face draining of color. You are misremembering. Am I? I looked at the relatives. Does anyone else know I own a house? Because this is the first time I'm hearing about it. Dad just said I signed paperwork. When did I sign paperwork for a house I thought was a pile of ash? Summer, that is enough. Dad slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. You are making a scene. You are drunk. I haven't touched my wine, Dad, I said calmly. Then you are crazy, he spat out. You are twisting things. Arthur, she is unstable. She has always been jealous of Sabrina. She is making this up to humiliate us. She didn't ask the question, Leo, Grandpa said, his voice like a gavel strike. I did. Grandpa reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a gun, but he might as well have. He pulled out the thick, cream-colored envelope we had prepared with Miles. He tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed right in the middle of the centerpiece, knocking over a pine cone. If she signed the paperwork, Grandpa said, then you won't mind explaining why the signature on the power of attorney in that envelope doesn't match the signature on her driver's license, or why the notary who stamped it is your golfing buddy, Mr. Stevens, who lost his license for fraud last year. My father stared at the envelope. He looked like he wanted to vomit. Open it, Leo, Grandpa commanded. Read the first page to your guests. I think Mark would be very interested to see the balance sheet of Willowmere Retreat LLC and exactly where the profits have been going every month. Dad didn't move. He couldn't move. The trap had snapped shut. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't the one holding the key. I leaned back in my chair. I watched the color vanish from my mother's face. I watched Sabrina realize that her seed fund was sitting in that envelope. The dinner was officially over. The trial had begun. The silence in the dining room was not empty. It was vibrating, like a violin string pulled until it was about to snap. My father, Leonard Hart, looked at the envelope in the center of the table as if it contained anthrax. This is ridiculous, Dad sputtered, his laugh sounding more like a cough. He looked around the table, his eyes darting frantically from Uncle Mark to Aunt Clara, desperate to find an ally. Arthur, you are putting on a show. Summer as well. You know how she gets. She forgets things. She gets emotional. We explained the trust structure to her 3 years ago. She probably just nodded along and didn't absorb the details. She is not a finance person. Are you, honey? He turned to me, his smile stretching so wide it looked painful. Tell them. Summer. Tell them you just forgot. It happens. We are not mad at you. He was trying to gaslight me in real time, in front of an audience. It was a maneuver he had performed 1,000 times before, usually successfully. But tonight, the script had changed. I have a very good memory, Dad, I said, my voice dropping the fragile, confused tremor I had used earlier. It was cold now, steady. I remember the day I had to sell my laptop to pay for a root canal. I remember the day I asked you for a loan to move into a safer apartment, and you told me that struggle builds character. I remember everything. Grandpa Arthur did not look at Dad. He reached out and tapped the envelope with one manicured finger. Read the first document, Leo, Grandpa said softly, or shall I ask Mark to read it? Uncle Mark, who looked like he wished he could teleport anywhere else, reached out tentatively. I can take a look. No. Dad snatched the envelope before Mark could touch it. His hands were shaking so badly that the paper rattled. He ripped it open, tearing the top edge jaggedly. He pulled out the first sheet. It was the deed. It is a standard boilerplate, Dad mumbled, not looking up. Just technical ownership papers. Read the line under grantee, Grandpa commanded. Dad swallowed. Summer Armstrong. And the date, October 14th, 3 years ago. A gasp came from the other side of the table. It was Sabrina. She was staring at me, her mouth slightly open, a piece of lobster falling from her fork. Wait, Sabrina said, her voice high and sharp. You mean Summer owns that house? The big one on the lake? The one with the boat dock? Yes, Grandpa said. She has owned it for 3 years. It is a property currently valued at $1.2 million, mortgage-free. Sabrina turned to our mother, her eyes wide with betrayal. You told me Summer was broke. You told me she couldn't afford to buy me a birthday present last year because she was bad with money. She has $1 million house. It is for tax purposes, Mom shrieked, her composure finally cracking. She stood up, her napkin fluttering to the floor. Sabrina, don't look at me like that. We put it in Summer's name to lower the estate tax burden. It is a shell ownership. She doesn't really own it. It is family property. A shell ownership, Grandpa repeated, savoring the words as if they were poisonous berries. Interesting legal theory. Denise, let's test it. He pointed to the second document that Dad was trying to hide behind the deed. The second paper, Leo, the power of attorney. Dad didn't move. Show it to Mark, Grandpa said, reluctantly. Dad slid the paper across the mahogany table. Uncle Mark put on his reading glasses. He squinted at the bottom of the page. It says here, Summer Armstrong grants Leonard Hart full authority to lease and encumber the property. Mark read, and there is a signature. Look at the signature. Mark, Grandpa said, does that look like Summer's handwriting? Mark looked at the document, then looked at me. He had seen my thank you cards for years. He knew my cramped, small script. The signature on the paper was looping, flamboyant, taking up 3 inches of space. It looks well. It looks like Denise's handwriting, Mark said, his voice quiet with shock. That is a lie, Mom shouted. I have a very common style of handwriting. You can't prove that. Actually, Grandpa said, reaching into his inner jacket pocket again. We can. I took the liberty of having a forensic handwriting analyst review this document yesterday, along with a sample of Summer's real signature and a sample of yours. Denise, from a Christmas card you sent me. He slid a report across the table. It was thick, bound in clear plastic, with the logo of a forensic document firm on the cover. Miles had been thorough. The analyst concludes there is a 99% probability that the signature on this legal document is a forgery created by Denise Hart. Grandpa said. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I stood up. My legs felt strong. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to shrink. I never signed that, I said, addressing the room. I never saw that document. I never saw the deed. Until yesterday. I didn't know I had a house. While you were collecting rent, Dad, I was moving out of my apartment on 4th Street because they raised the rent by $50 and I couldn't afford it. I slept in my car for 3 nights before I found the studio above the laundromat. Summer, don't be dramatic, Mom snapped, though her eyes were terrified. We were managing it for you. You know you are irresponsible with cash. If we gave you that money, you would have wasted it. We were putting it aside. Investing it. Investing it. Grandpa's voice turned into a growl. Is that what you call it? He flipped over the next stack of papers from the envelope. These were the bank statements. He fanned them out on the table like a winning poker hand. November, $4,500 in, $4,000 out to Mercedes-Benz Financial. Grandpa pointed a finger at Dad. That is your car, Leo. Summer is paying for your S-Class. December, Grandpa continued, slapping another page down. $6,000 out to Saks Fifth Avenue. Denise, is that the coat you are wearing? Mom instinctively pulled her cashmere wrap tighter around herself. January, Grandpa said, his voice rising. $8,000. Travel expenses. Rome. Sabrina, wasn't that your study abroad trip? The one your parents said they scrimped and saved to pay for? Sabrina looked at the paper, then at me. Her face went pale. No, she whispered. Dad said he cashed in a bond. He said it was his retirement money. It was my rent money, I said, looking my sister in the eye. Every latte you drank in a piazza, Every train ticket you bought, every designer shoe you purchased to impress your followers, it came from my house. It came from the money Grandpa sent to keep me off the street." Sabrina looked like she was going to be sick. She pushed her chair back, the legs screeching against the hardwood floor. "I didn't know," she stammered, looking at Dad. "You told me you were paying for it. You let me brag about how supportive you were." "We were supportive," Dad yelled, slamming his hand down again. "It is all the same pot. Family money is family money. What does it matter whose name is on the deed? We feed you, don't we? We raised you." "You didn't raise me," I said quietly. "You erased me. And there is one more thing," Grandpa said. He wasn't done. He had one final knife to twist. He pulled out a small bundle of envelopes tied with a rubber band. They were worn, traveled, and covered in postmarks. "I wrote to Summer every month," Grandpa said to the room. "I sent checks. I sent letters asking why she never replied. And every month, the letters disappeared." He held up one envelope. "Look at the address." Uncle Mark leaned in. "It is addressed to Summer's apartment on 4th Street. "And look at the correction sticker," Grandpa said. "Someone manually crossed out her address and wrote a forwarding instructions. Please forward to 12 Hart Lane. Go, Denise Hart." He tossed the bundle to Mom. She didn't catch it. It hit her chest and fell into her lap. "That is your handwriting, Denise," Grandpa said. "You didn't just steal her money. You stole her grandfather. You let her believe I had abandoned her. You let me believe she hated me. You intercepted every single attempt we made to connect, just so you could cash the checks inside." I looked at my mother. I waited for her to deny it. I waited for her to say it was a mistake, but she just stared at the letters in her lap, her hands trembling. "I did it to protect her," Mom whispered, her voice shaking. "You were filling her head with nonsense. Arthur, all that talk about lives no one knows. You were making her weird. We wanted her to be normal, to fit in." "You wanted her to be silent," I corrected. "Because as long as I was the failure, you didn't have to explain where the extra $4,000 a month was coming from." I looked at Dad. He was gray, his skin the color of wet ash. He was slumped in his chair, the arrogance completely drained out of him. "How many times?" I asked him, the question that had been burning a hole in my chest since I saw the bank statements. "How many times did you look at your bank account and see the deposit from Willowmere hit?" I asked, walking around the table until I was standing right behind him. "And then look at me, wearing shoes with holes in the soles, and tell me that you couldn't help me with a dentist bill. How many times did you tell me Grandpa was broke and sick in Europe, using a fake story about medical bills to explain why he wasn't sending money, while you were spending his checks on golf clubs?" "I never," Dad started, but his voice failed him. "How did you sleep?" I asked, my voice breaking just a little. "Knowing that your daughter was hungry so you could look rich, did you sleep well?" Dad was the pillow soft. The room was suffocating. Uncle Mark was staring at his brother as if he was looking at a stranger. Aunt Clara was crying silently into her napkin. Dad looked up at me. His eyes were red, rimmed with panic and desperation. He saw the stack of papers. He saw the forensic report. He saw the ruin of his reputation sitting on the damask tablecloth. He needed a way out. He needed a story that made him look like a victim, not a monster. "I had to," Dad blurted out. The confession exploded out of him like vomit. "It wasn't for me," he cried, looking around the table, begging for understanding. "The business the market crashed 3 years ago. I was leveraged. I was going to lose everything. The house, the cars, the club membership. We were going to be bankrupt." "Summer on the street." He reached out, trying to grab my hand, but I stepped back. "I only borrowed it," he pleaded. "I was going to pay it back, I swear. Summer. Once the Willowmere deal stabilized, once the commercial lot paid out, I was going to write you a check for every cent, plus interest. It was a loan, a bridge loan to save the family." "You didn't ask," I said coldly. "If I asked, you would have said no," he shouted. "You don't understand business. You don't understand what it takes to maintain this life." "So you stole it," Uncle Mark said. His voice was heavy with disgust. "You forged her signature and stole her inheritance to cover your bad bets." "I was saving us," Dad screamed, standing up now, his face purple. "I did it for you, Denise, for you, Sabrina. To keep this roof over your heads. I am the provider. I did what I had to do." He stood there, panting, his chest heaving. He thought he had made a noble defense. He thought he had justified his crime. But then he looked at Grandpa Arthur. Grandpa was smiling. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who just heard the trap snap shut. "Thank you, Leo," Grandpa said softly. "That is exactly what we needed to hear." Dad froze. He looked at the envelope. He looked at me. And then he realized he hadn't just explained himself. He had confessed. He had admitted, in front of witnesses, to motive, intent, and execution. "Miles," Grandpa asked, not looking away from my father, "did you get that?" From the hallway, a voice spoke up. I hadn't realized the door to the kitchen had been left ajar. "Loud and clear, Arthur," Miles Corbett said. Stepping into the dining room, he was holding his phone, the recording app clearly visible on the screen. My father fell back into his chair. It wasn't a sit. It was a collapse. The structure of his lies hadn't just cracked, it had disintegrated. My father's confession hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. He had admitted it. He had called it a bridge loan, a necessary measure. But he had admitted to taking the money. But the hole he had dug was about to get deeper. I looked at the man who had raised me, the man who was currently slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon, and I felt a strange, cold precision take over my mind. "You say you did it to save the family," I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. "But you didn't just hide the income. Dad, you killed the house." I turned to Uncle Mark and Aunt Clara, who were staring at me with a mixture of horror and fascination. 3 years ago," I said, addressing them directly. "About a month after my 25th birthday, Mom and Dad sat me down in this very room. They looked devastated. They told me they had received bad news from Grandpa's lawyer in Europe." I paused, letting the memory sharpen the edge of my words. "They told me that the old cottage on Lake Willowmere, the one Grandpa loved, had burned to the ground. An electrical fire, faulty wiring. They said it was a total loss. And then I looked at my mother, who was gripping her napkin so hard her knuckles were white. "They told me Grandpa had to sell the scorched land for pennies on the dollar just to pay for a specialized heart surgery in Switzerland. They said he was broke and sick, and that was why he stopped writing." A gasp went around the table. "That is monstrous," Aunt Clara whispered. "It was a lie." I said, "There was no fire. There was no surgery. The house was sitting there, pristine, generating $4,500 a month in rent. They invented a tragedy to make sure I would never drive out there to check. They invented a tragedy to make me feel guilty for even thinking about asking for help." Sabrina stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the floorboards. She looked like she had been slapped. Her face, usually composed and camera-ready, was twisted in ugly confusion. "Wait," she said, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "So the money my tuition for Parsons, the semester in Florence, the brand launch party last month that cost $12,000, she turned to our parents, her eyes wide and wild. Where did that come from?" Dad didn't answer. He was staring at the tablecloth. "Answer me," Sabrina screamed. "Did that come from Summer? Was I living off her money?" "It is all the same," Dad yelled back, finally snapping. "It is heart money. Does it matter which account it routed through?" "It matters," Sabrina shrieked, "because I told everyone I was self-made. I told my followers my parents supported my vision. If this comes out, if people find out I was burning through my sister's inheritance while she was working at a dentist's office, I am ruined. I am canceled." It was a stunning display of narcissism, even in the face of grand larceny. Sabrina's biggest fear was her engagement metrics. But then, the fear shifted into something sharper. "My car," Sabrina whispered. "The Range Rover." It is in your name, Dad. But who paid for it? The LLC paid for it, Dad muttered. The LLC is Summer, Sabrina shouted. She turned to me, looking terrified for the first time in her life. I didn't know. Summer, I swear, I thought they were rich. I thought you were just, choosing to be poor because you were artsy or something. Choosing to be poor, I repeated, shaking my head. You really believe that you watched me tape my shoes together and thought it was an aesthetic choice? I am just a kid, Sabrina yelled, throwing her hands up. I just spent what they gave me. It is not my fault they are liars. Don't you call us liars. Mom suddenly stood up. Her face flushed red. She pointed a shaking finger at Dad. He is the liar. It was his idea, all of it. Excuse me. Dad looked up, blindsided. It was you. Leonard, Mom cried, tears streaming down her face, though I noted they didn't ruin her mascara. You came to me that night 3 years ago. You said the business was underwater. You said we were going to lose the club membership. You said, if Summer finds out she has this asset, she will sell it and buy a condo and we will have nothing. You told me to sign the papers. You brought the notary to the house. You harpy, Dad roared, standing up to face her. I told you we needed liquidity. You were the one who said, Summer doesn't need a house, she needs a husband. You were the one who said she wouldn't know what to do with equity and who spent the money. Denise, who needed the trip to the Amalfi Coast last spring, who needed the new veneers, who insisted on the S-Class because the E-Class was for middle management. I maintained our image, Mom screamed back. I kept this family respectable while you ran the business into the ground. And don't pretend you didn't enjoy it. You drove that car every day. You drank the wine. You are the one who set up the LLC to dodge the taxes. Because you wanted the renovation. Dad shouted. You wanted the kitchen done so you could host the bridge club. You said, use Summer's credit. She never checks it anyway. You ruined her credit score. Denise, you opened those credit cards in her name. I stood there, frozen, watching them tear each other apart. It was like watching wolves turn on their own pack member. They were trading accusations like blows, each one revealing a new layer of their greed. They weren't protecting the family anymore. They were protecting their own skins. I am the victim here, Mom sobbed, turning to Uncle Mark. He manipulated me. I am just a wife who trusted her husband. You forged my signature. Mom, I said quietly. My voice cut through their screaming match. Dad didn't hold the pen. You did. You practiced it. I found the notepad in the trash 3 years ago with all the loops on it. I thought you were just doodling. You were practicing becoming me. Mom stopped crying instantly. She looked at me with cold, dead eyes. I gave you life, she hissed. I fed you. I clothed you. And this is how you repay me by humiliating me in front of the county. You didn't raise me, I said. You managed me, and you did a poor job. Hey now, Uncle Mark stood up, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. He looked pale and sick. Let's all calm down. Leo, Denise, this is bad, very bad, but surely we can keep this in the house. We don't need to involve authorities. It is a family matter. We can work out a payment plan. A payment plan? Grandpa Arthur laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. Mark, look at them. They don't have a dime. They have spent it all. There is nothing to pay back with. But family? Mark started. Family, Grandpa interrupted, his voice rising. It is because everyone treats this as a family matter that it went on for 3 years, because it was family. Summer didn't ask questions. Because it was family. She starved while they feasted. No. The shield of family ends where the crime begins. I looked at my parents. Really looked at them. For years. I had craved their approval. I had wanted Dad to look at me the way he looked at a quarterly report with interest. I had wanted Mom to look at me the way she looked at Sabrina with pride. I had thought that if I just worked harder, if I was just quieter, more obedient, less burdensome, they would finally love me. But they didn't love anyone, not even each other. They loved the reflection of themselves they saw in the mirror of their wealth. And when that mirror cracked, They were willing to use me as the glue to fix it. "I am done," I said. The room went quiet again. "Summer," Dad said, his voice dropping to a desperate wheedle. "Honey, please, think about what you are doing. If you pursue this, if you let Arthur do this, we could go to jail. Your mother could go to jail. Do you want that on your conscience?" "Do I want justice on my conscience?" I asked. "Yes. I think I can live with that." "We are your parents," Mom wailed, playing her last card. "We sacrificed everything for you." "You sacrificed me for everything," I corrected. "You sacrificed my credit score. You sacrificed my relationship with Grandpa. You sacrificed my trust. You didn't sacrifice for me. You sacrificed me." I turned to Miles Corbett, who had been standing silently by the door, recording everything. "Did you get the part about the credit cards?" I asked. "Every word," Miles said. "And the admission about the fake fire story?" "Clear as a bell." "Good," I said. Dad's face went from red to white. He slumped back into his chair, realizing that his shouting match with Mom hadn't been a defense, it had been an indictment. Sabrina was sitting on the floor now, crying into her hands. "I am going to lose my followers," she sobbed. "I am going to have to get a job." It was almost funny. Almost. "You might have to work at a dental office," I told her. "They are hiring. It pays $12 an hour. You will learn the value of $1 very quickly." Sabrina looked up at me with pure hatred. "I hate you. You ruined everything." "I didn't ruin anything." "Sabrina," I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying for 28 years. "I just turned on the lights." The atmosphere in the room was suffocating. The smell of the expensive roast beef was nauseating. The beautiful Christmas tree in the corner looked gaudy and fake. Then, it happened. Ding-dong. The doorbell rang. It wasn't the warm, inviting chime of guests arriving. It sounded sharp, final. It sounded like the gavel banging down in a courtroom. Dad jumped in his seat. Mom stopped breathing. "Who is that?" Dad whispered. "We are not expecting anyone else." I looked at Grandpa. He nodded. I looked at Miles. He put his phone in his pocket. "I believe," Miles said calmly, "that is the inevitable consequence of your actions." "No," Mom whispered. "No, no, no, Leo, do something." "What do you want me to do?" "Denise," Dad snapped, his voice breaking. "It is over." I turned and walked toward the hallway. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor, the floor that I owned, in the house that I owned, walking toward the door that I had the right to open. "Summer," Mom screamed after me. "Don't you open that door. Don't you dare." I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I reached the heavy oak door. I saw the silhouette of two figures through the frosted glass. I saw the reflection of the flashing blue and red lights dancing on the snow-covered lawn outside. My hand touched the cold brass handle. For a second, I hesitated, not because I wanted to save them, but because I knew that once I turned this handle, Summer Hart, the quiet, obedient, invisible daughter, would be dead, and Summer Armstrong, the woman who took back her name and her life, would be born. I turned the handle. I pulled the door open. The cold winter air rushed in, biting and clean, sweeping away the stale scent of lies and roast beef. Two police officers stood on the porch. Behind them, the night was alive with the silent spinning of the lights. "Good evening," the officer in front said. He looked past me, into the house where the shouting had died down to a terrified whimper. "We received a call regarding a disturbance and a report of significant financial fraud." I stepped aside. "Come in," I said. "You are right on time." The cold air that rushed into the foyer was not just winter wind. It felt like a cleaning agent, sterile and biting, sweeping away the scent of roasted meat and expensive perfume that had choked me for hours. Standing on the porch were two officers. They were not the neighborhood beat cops who handled noise complaints. These men wore the crisp, dark uniforms of the Serious Crimes Division. Their faces were impassive, professional masks that gave nothing away. Behind them, standing just slightly in the shadow of the porch column, was Miles Corbett, He stepped forward into the light. He did not look like the gentle family friend who had offered me tea in his office yesterday. He looked like a prosecutor. He caught my eye, and for a brief second, the professional mask slipped. His eyebrows raised just a fraction of an inch. A silent, final question. Are you sure? Summer. Once they step over this threshold, the world changes. I looked at the snow swirling around his polished shoes. I looked at the flashing blue lights reflecting in the glass of the door, pulsating like a frantic heartbeat. I am ready, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow, but unbreakable. I stepped back, holding the door wide open. The two officers nodded to me, a sharp, curt gesture of acknowledgement, and stepped inside. The heavy thud of their boots on the hardwood floor echoed through the house. It was a sound that did not belong here. This was a house of soft rugs and hushed whispers, not heavy treads and tactical belts. We walked into the dining room in a single file line. I took up the rear, feeling like a ghost haunting my own life. The scene inside had frozen in a tableau of panic. My father, Leonard, was half standing, gripping the edge of the table as if it were a life raft in a storm. My mother, Denise, had her hands pressed over her mouth, her eyes wide and wet, staring at the uniforms. Sabrina was still on the floor, but she had stopped crying. She was staring at the handcuffs hanging from the officer's belt with morbid fascination. "Good evening," the lead officer said. His voice was a baritone rumble that cut through the silence. "I am Officer Miller. This is Officer Davis. We are looking for Leonard Hart and Denise Hart." Dad swallowed hard. I saw the muscles in his throat work convulsively. He tried to put on his smile, the one he used for disgruntled investors and zoning board members, but it slid off his face like oil on water. "I am Leonard," he said, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat and tried again, deeper this time. "I am Leonard Hart. Officers, this is a bit of a surprise. We are in the middle of a family dinner, Christmas Eve. Actually, surely whatever this is can wait until Monday morning." "I am afraid not, sir," Officer Miller said. He did not smile back. He did not look charmed. "We are here responding to a formal complaint regarding grand larceny, wire fraud, and identity theft. We have a warrant to secure evidence and, depending on the cooperation of the victims, place the suspects in custody." "Custody?" Mom squeaked. The word sounded absurd coming from her mouth. A word that belonged on television shows, not in her dining room. "You mean arrest. You can't arrest us. We are the Harts." "This is a misunderstanding," Dad said quickly, stepping out from behind the table. He held his hands up, palms open, trying to regain control of the room. "Officers, look, I understand you have a job to do, but this is a domestic dispute, a family matter, my daughter." He gestured vaguely toward me without looking at me. "She is upset. We had an argument about finances. She made a call in the heat of the moment. We can resolve this internally. There is no need for police reports. It is not a domestic dispute when you cross state lines with stolen funds. Leo," Miles Corbett said. Dad whipped his head around. "Miles, you brought them here." "I brought the law here, Leo," Miles said calmly. He walked to the head of the table and placed his briefcase on the white tablecloth, right next to the congealing gravy boat. He clicked the latches open. The sound was loud and crisp. "Officers," Miles said, turning to the policeman. "My client, Summer Armstrong, alleges that for the past 3 years, these two individuals have engaged in a systematic conspiracy to defraud her of assets totaling over $150,000. We have the documentation right here." Miles pulled a new stack of papers from his case. These were not copies. These were the originals we had retrieved from the bank, sealed in plastic evidence bags. "First," Miles listed, his voice devoid of emotion, "the creation of a shell company, Willowmere Retreat LLC, used to launder rental income from a property legally owned by Ms. Armstrong. We have the Articles of Incorporation here, signed by Leonard Hart. That was for her benefit," Dad shouted. "I was managing her asset." "Second," Miles continued, ignoring him. The forging of a power of attorney document. We have the forensic analysis confirming the forgery. This document was used to illegally encumber the property and divert funds to personal accounts. Third, Miles said, and he paused here, looking directly at me. And this is a new discovery we made this morning. Summer, I didn't have the heart to tell you until we had the proof. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. What? I asked. What else? Miles pulled out a credit report. It was thick. While investigating the bank transfers, Miles said, addressing the room but looking at me, we found a secondary credit line, a platinum card issued by American Express. I don't have an Amex, I whispered. I applied for a basic secured card last year and got rejected. You got rejected because your debt-to-income ratio was already maxed out, Miles said gently. This card was opened 3 years ago. It is linked to your social security number. Summer. But the billing address is here, at this house. He held up a statement. Current balance $22,000. Miles read. Charges include a membership to the Riverbend Country Club, payments to a luxury car leasing firm, and regular payments to a cosmetic surgery clinic. The room spun. It wasn't just the house. It wasn't just the rent. Every time I had walked into a bank to ask for a loan for a car so I wouldn't have to take the bus, and the loan officer had looked at his screen with a frown and told me my credit was overextended, it was because of this. It was because my father was paying his country club dues with my name. You ruined my credit, I said. My voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like a scream. You stole my identity so you could play golf. We needed a higher limit, Dad blurted out. My cards were maxed out. We needed to maintain appearances at the club for networking. It was for business. Summer, if the business succeeded, I could have paid it all off. You mortgaged her future to pay for your hobbies, Officer Miller said. He turned his gaze from my father to me. The officer stepped closer. He looked at me with a seriousness that made my knees weak. Ms. Armstrong, Officer Miller said, based on the evidence presented by your counsel, we have probable cause to arrest Leonard and Denise Hart for fraud and identity theft. However, given the familial relationship, the district attorney often looks for the victim's explicit cooperation before proceeding with an immediate arrest tonight. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. Do you confirm that this is your complaint? Do you confirm that these actions were taken without your consent? And do you wish to proceed with pressing charges? The air in the room vanished. Summer. Mom screamed. She lunged across the space between us. Officer Davis stepped forward to block her, but she threw herself at my feet. She grabbed my hand, the hand she hadn't held since I was 6 years old, and squeezed it with a desperate, clawing strength. Don't do this, Mom wailed. Her face was a mask of running mascara and terror. We are your parents. We are old. Summer, we can't go to jail. I have high blood pressure. Your father has a bad back. We will die in there. Do you want to kill us? Please, Summer, she begged, pulling at my arm. We will pay it back. We will sell everything. Just tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you gave us permission. Please, baby, be a good daughter. Just this once. Summer, Dad said, his voice trembling. He didn't move toward me, but he looked at me with the eyes of a drowning man. Think about the family name. Think about the shame. Everyone will know. We will be pariahs. Is money worth destroying us? Then Sabrina crawled up from the floor. She grabbed the hem of my thrift store dress. Summer, listen to me, she sobbed. If they get arrested, the assets get frozen. The house, the cars, everything. I will have nothing. I won't have a place to live. I won't have a car. My agency will drop me if my parents are felons. Please, I will make it up to you. When I get famous, I will pay you back double. I swear, just let it go. Don't be so cruel. I looked down at them. I looked at my mother, who was worried about her blood pressure but hadn't cared when I had pneumonia and no health insurance. I looked at my father, who was worried about the family name but had no problem signing my name to a fraudulent credit application. I looked at my sister, who was worried about her modeling contract but had never once asked why I was wearing shoes with holes in them. They were begging. They were crying, but not one of them had said the word sorry. They weren't sorry they hurt me. They were sorry they were caught. I remembered the night I got the eviction notice from my first apartment. I remembered sitting on the floor in the dark, calling home, crying, asking for $500. Dad had told me, "We just don't have the liquidity right now, Summer. You need to learn to budget." That same week, according to the credit card statement Miles had just shown me, he had charged a $500 dinner at a steakhouse. He had eaten my rent money. I looked at Grandpa Arthur. He was standing by the fireplace. He didn't say a word. He just nodded. It was a small nod, barely visible, but it gave me the strength to stand straight. I pulled my hand away from my mother's grip. She recoiled, as if I had burned her. I looked at Officer Miller. "I confirm the complaint," I said. My voice did not shake. "I confirm that I never signed those documents. I confirm that I never authorized those credit cards. I confirm that they stole my property and my identity." "And do you wish to proceed?" Officer Miller asked. I looked at the people who had given me life, and then spent 28 years draining it out of me. "Yes," I said. "I want to proceed. I want everything done according to the law." "Summer?" Mom shrieked, a sound of pure betrayal. "How can you—" "We are family." I looked at her one last time. "If being family was the reason I had to starve so you could feast," I said, "then we were never family. We were just a business arrangement, and I'm closing the account." I turned to the officer. "Take them." Officer Miller nodded to his partner. "Leonard Hart, Denise Hart," he said, pulling the metal cuffs from his belt. The sound of the ratchet clicking open was the loudest thing I had ever heard. "You are under arrest." The room erupted into chaos, but I didn't hear it. I felt a strange ringing in my ears, a high, clear note of absolute freedom. I watched as Officer Davis took my father's arm and turned him around. I watched my father's face crumble as the cold steel touched his wrists. It was done. The stage had collapsed. The actors were being dragged away, and for the first time in my life, I was not in the audience. I was the director. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut is a sound you never forget. It is mechanical, cold, and utterly final. It is the sound of a door locking, not just on a wrist, but on a life, in the dining room of the Hart residence. That sound echoed twice. Officer Davis secured my father's wrists behind his back. Dad didn't fight physically, but his eyes were darting around the room, wild and desperate, looking for an exit that didn't exist. Officer Miller approached my mother. She was still weeping. A keening, high-pitched sound that grated on the nerves. When he touched her arm, she flinched as if he were burning her. "You have the right to remain silent," Officer Miller began, his voice a monotone drone against the backdrop of my mother's sobbing. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Sabrina scrambled up from the floor. Her mascara was running in black rivers down her cheeks. She lunged toward the sideboard where her designer handbag, a Birkin that I now knew my house had paid for, was sitting. "My bag!" she shrieked. "I need my phone. I need to call my agent." She grabbed the handle, but Officer Miller's hand shot out and intercepted hers. "I am sorry, miss," he said firmly. "That bag, and the contents within, are considered potential evidence of assets purchased with illicit funds. It stays here to be catalogued." "You can't take my bag," Sabrina screamed, stomping her foot like a toddler. "It is mine. I didn't steal anything. I am the victim." She turned to the officer, pulling at her diamond necklace. "What about this? Can I keep this? It was a birthday gift. If it was purchased within the time frame of the alleged fraud, it will be seized pending investigation," the officer replied. Sabrina let out a howl of despair that had nothing to do with her parents being arrested and everything to do with her realizing she was about to be poor. She looked at me with pure venom. "I hate you," she hissed. "You are stripping us naked. Are you happy now?" I looked at her. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt clean. "I am not stripping you, Sabrina," I said quietly. I am just taking back the clothes you bought with my money. My father was being led toward the door. As he passed me, he stopped. The officer gave him a second. Dad looked at me, his face gray and aged, the arrogance completely gone, replaced by a deep, terrified bitterness. "You will regret this," he rasped. "You destroyed your own blood. You sold us out." I met his gaze. I didn't blink. "No, Dad," I said. "I didn't sell you out. I just refused to let you keep selling me." He stared at me for a moment, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not remorse, but shock. He realized, finally, that the daughter he had dismissed as weak was the one who had just brought down his entire empire. Then the officer nudged him, and he was gone. The flashing lights outside painted the walls in strobes of red and blue, then faded into the distance as the cruisers pulled away. The silence that rushed back into the house was deafening. Uncle Mark and Aunt Clara stood up. They looked shell-shocked. They mumbled awkward goodbyes, not making eye contact with me or Grandpa, and hurried out the door as if the house were infected. Within 5 minutes, the house was empty. It was just me and Grandpa Arthur, sitting at the table amidst the ruins of the Christmas feast. The roast beef was cold. The wine was untouched. The candles had burned down to nubs. "Well," Grandpa said, picking up his glass of water, "that was a hell of a dinner." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 3 years. "Yeah, it was." 3 days later, the sun was rising over Lake Willowmere. The sky was a bruised purple, fading into a soft, hopeful pink. The air was crisp, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. I stood on the gravel driveway of 44 Willowmere Drive, my hands deep in the pockets of my coat. Grandpa Arthur stood next to me. He looked tired. The legal meetings over the last 48 hours had been grueling, but he stood tall. "Here," he said, handing me a small, silver object. It was a key. It wasn't a symbolic key. It was the actual key to the front door. "Miles finished the paperwork yesterday afternoon," Grandpa said. "The injunction against your father's accounts is active. The LLC has been dissolved. The deed is fully, unencumbered, and publicly in your name. No power of attorney attached. No strings." I took the key. It felt cold and heavy in my palm. We walked up the steps to the porch. The Christmas lights were still up, looking a little sad in the daylight. The front door opened before I could put the key in the lock. Peter, the tenant. My tenant stood there. He looked anxious. "Ms. Armstrong," he said, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Mr. Grayson, please, come in." We stepped into the warmth of the hallway. Peter's wife, Sarah, was standing in the kitchen doorway, looking nervous. They had heard the news. Riverbend was a small town. The arrest of a prominent developer like Leonard Hart was front-page news within hours. "We didn't know what to expect," Peter said, his voice tight. "We assumed with everything happening with your father that we would be evicted. We started packing boxes last night." I looked at the living room. I saw the family photos on the mantel, Peter and Sarah with their kids. I saw the worn spot on the rug where their dog probably slept. They had made this place a home. They were innocent bystanders in my father's con. "You are not being evicted, Peter," I said. He blinked. "We aren't." "No," I said. "I spoke with my lawyer. Your lease with my father with the LLC is technically void because it was based on fraud. But I don't want to throw you out. You have been good tenants. You took care of the house when I didn't even know it existed." I pulled a folder from my bag. "This is a new lease," I said, handing it to him. "It is direct between you and me. No middleman, no Leonard Hart. The rent is the same. The terms are the same. The only difference is the name on the check." Peter took the folder. His hands were shaking slightly. "Would you do that, after everything he did to you, using us as the excuse?" "You weren't the excuse," I said. "You were just part of the scenery. I am not going to punish you for his crimes." Sarah let out a sob and covered her mouth. "Thank you. Oh my God. Thank you. We love this house. We wanted to buy it one day." "Maybe one day you can," I smiled. But for now, I need to look around. I need to see what I actually own. Of course, Peter said, stepping back. Take your time. We will be in the garden. I walked into the living room. It was strange. I expected to feel angry. I expected to look at the high ceilings, the stone fireplace, the view of the lake, and feel a crushing sense of loss for the 3 years I had missed. I expected to mourn the nights I spent shivering in my studio apartment while this fireplace roared for strangers. But as I ran my hand along the smooth wood of the mantelpiece, I didn't feel loss. I felt strength. If I had been given this house 3 years ago, at 25, what would I have done? I was timid then. I was desperate for my parents' approval. I would have let my father manage it. I would have let my mother decorate it. I would have let them turn it into an extension of their ego. But I wasn't that girl anymore. The poverty, the struggle, the nights counting pennies those years had forged me. They had burned away the softness and left something harder, something durable. I knew the value of $1 now. I knew the value of my own name. I knew how to stand up when my knees were shaking. I walked to the large bay window and looked out at the lake. The water was still as glass, reflecting the trees and the sky. "It is beautiful, isn't it?" Grandpa asked, coming up beside me. "It is," I said. "It is peaceful." "It was supposed to be your sanctuary," he said. "I am sorry it became a crime scene." "It is not a crime scene anymore," I said. "Now it is just a house. My house." Grandpa reached into his coat pocket and pulled out another document. It was thick, bound in blue legal paper. "There is one more thing," he said. "Grandpa, no more papers." I laughed weakly. "I think I have signed enough affidavits to last a lifetime." "This one is different," he said seriously. "This is my will, or rather, what used to be my will." He handed it to me. "I was going to leave everything to you when I died," he said. "My remaining portfolio, my stocks, my collection, everything, but watching what happened, watching how easily they tried to erase you." He paused, looking out at the water. "I don't want to wait until I'm dead to make sure you are safe. I don't want there to be any question, any probate court fight, any loophole they can try to exploit from a jail cell. I am transferring it all to you now. Today, it is an irrevocable trust. You are the sole trustee. You control it all." I stared at the papers. It wasn't just the house. It was everything. It was freedom. Absolute, terrifying freedom. "Grandpa," I whispered, "you don't have to do this. I can work. I have the rent money now. I am okay." "I know you are," he said, putting a hand on my shoulder. "That is why I can give it to you. Because I know you won't waste it, and I know you won't let anyone take it from you." He looked me in the eye. "I want to see you enjoy it. Summer, I want to see you build a life. I missed 3 years of it. I don't want to miss a second more." I took the papers. I didn't cry. I had cried enough over the hearts. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me," he said. "Just promise me one thing. Anything. Promise me you will never apologize for taking up space again." I smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached my eyes. "I promise." We walked out to the back porch. The air was colder here, coming off the water, but it felt bracing. I thought about what lay ahead. There would be a trial. There would be depositions. I would have to sit in a courtroom and point at my parents and testify against them. I would have to endure the gossip of Riverbend, the whispers in the grocery store, the people calling me the ungrateful daughter who put her parents in prison. Sabrina would probably write a tell-all book. My mother would probably give tearful interviews from behind glass. It would be messy. It would be hard. But it was my mess. I looked at the key in my hand. It was just a piece of metal, but it felt like a weapon against silence, a weapon against erasure. I turned back to the sliding glass door that led into the kitchen. I put my hand on the handle. "Grandpa," I said. "Yes, little owl." "I grew up in a house where I always felt like a guest," I said. "I felt like I was squatting in someone else's life, waiting to be asked to leave, waiting to be told I was in the way. I gripped the handle tight. "Today," I said, looking at him, "I am opening the first door that I am actually the master of." I turned the lock. Click, I slid the door open. "Coming in?" I asked. Grandpa smiled. "After you." I stepped over the threshold. I didn't look back at the driveway. I didn't look back at the police cars that existed in my memory. I stepped into the light of the kitchen, into the smell of coffee and possibilities. The role of the victim was over. The role of the invisible daughter was finished. I was Summer Armstrong, and I was finally home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe relaxing at home? Please let me know in the comments below so we can connect if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more revenge dramas. Please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach more people. Your support means the world to me.